Hey guys, welcome to the Electron Academy. My name is Hussein and I'm going to be your instructor for this Python series. So, last time we covered the first video in this series, which was about Python, well, Python, the print function, and we printed hello world and a lot of other stuff on the screen as well. So, if you haven't seen that video, then you should go check it out right now. The link is in the description below. So, after you've seen that, you can come back to this video, and now let's get started with the keywords for this video. So in this video, we're mainly going to cover variables, which is the next basic concept that we learn after you do the print function or after you print hello world on the screen. So let's get started with variables. So first of all, what are variables? Now, variables are like labeled containers that can store data. So imagine I have a container that's labeled food. And what am I going to store inside it? Obviously food. And I have another container which is called water. And what am I going to store inside that? I'm going to store water. So I have these two containers completely separate from each other, food and water, and one of them stores food, one of them stores water. So food and water are the labels for these containers. So in the same way, variables are labeled containers that can store data. What kind of data? Any data type that you can think of in Python. So for now, like in the last video, we only covered two data types, which were integers and strings. Now in this video, we're going to be covering two more, and we're going to be using those, well, one of them, in our practical exercise today. So that's what variables are, and we're going to see practical examples of it further on. So even if you're confused, then don't worry, you're going to get what's going on soon. And then we have floats. So floats are real numbers that have decimal points. So 10.3, 5.2, 8.5, any of these numbers which have decimal points are technically float numbers or float data type numbers. So what happens with decimal points is that there are technically two types of decimal points, and you have two different data types for them, which we're going to get into on the next data type, the next slide. But first, floats. So floats are not limited to any specific type of decimal points. You can do negative decimal points though, let me tell you. Again, depends on the type of float you're doing. Some you can, some you can't. So floats, basically, they can also contain multiple decimal points. So if I say 10.5362215, that's a valid number and it's a float number. That's what they call it in Python, and you can store that just fine inside Python. That works perfectly fine. So those are floats, and now the next one, which we're not going to be using in the video, but since we're covering floats, I thought it would be good to mention them in this video as well. Longs. So longs are basically integers of unlimited size. Now these integers can also act like a bigger version of the float. What do I mean by that? So integers of unlimited size. So you can imagine the possibilities of numbers you can store in here, like, I don't know. The biggest number I know is probably 1 quadrillion, or 999 quadrillion, and then just going down the number line. That's actually the biggest number that I know. Leave your biggest number down in the comments. I mean, are there any bigger numbers? There probably are, but I don't know them. Anyway, so you could probably store those numbers inside a log, although you won't really be needing to do that for small or even intermediate projects, and only big companies like with big projects or big machineries usually use long data types to store things. So they're basically integers of unlimited size, and remember I compared them to a float. Now the reason for that is because, let's say the float has a limit of 10.526182582165282. I just said a random number from the top of my head, but let's just assume that that's the limit of a float, okay? Or it doesn't process properly for any reason. Now, in that case, you can use longs instead for that exact decimal type, exact same decimal type. And that's why longs are mainly useful. And that's why they are a very key part of the data types in Python and many other programming languages as well. So now we're done for the keywords of this video. Very short, very few keywords, actually, just three. So, but now we'll move on to the practical of our lesson today. So variables, and yeah, let's get right into it. Okay, guys. So now we're gonna get into the practical, and let's just start by creating a variable. So how do you do that? Now, a simple variable is created by specifying its name. So I have a container. So the example I gave previously, I have a container named food, and I have a container named water. The water container contains water, and the food container contains food, right? Now over here, I can specify a variable called var. Its name is var space equals space and give it a value. So two, or I can give it a value of a string, so kind of like this. You can give it any value, like any data type, any value. So we covered strings and integers in the previous video, and we're also going to do it with floats. And yeah, let's just get started. So this is how you specify a container or variable's name. So I just gave the example of a container, and it's how variables are. Now another way you can think of containers or variables as is keys and values. So let's say you have the key to a door, or a key to a room, for example. So the key unlocks the door which opens the room. So you have a key. Let's say the key is called var, space equals space, and over here you define the value, or what's actually inside the room. So you have 8, for example, or you have 2. So that's how variables work. So you have a name and you have a value, or you have the label and you have the value over here. That's basically how you define variables, regardless of the data type. So let's click on run over here, and nothing seems to happen. Now, if you remember before, we actually did the print function, which is our first video. If you haven't checked that out, then I definitely recommend you do so. And let's go down here and write the print function and write var in here. Now, as you can see, that prints the number 2 on screen. And that's how you print variables. So you have to specify the key, or specify the name inside this print function. And that's how it prints the number 2 on screen right here. So like that. Now, funny thing about Python variables, let me just write the same variable again. So I'm creating the same value variable again. So far, space equals space 1, and then enter and print var again. Now what do you think this is going to do? It's probably going to throw an error, right? You can't create two containers with the same name. That doesn't make any sense. How are you going to reference them? And if you click on run, you can see that it doesn't throw you an error. It actually just prints out both of the numbers. So you're probably confused, like what's going on? So to get what's going on here, you have to understand how Python works. So Python starts examining your code starting from the top, and let's just think through this code as Python's perspective. You define a variable called var, which value is 2. You print that variable and you get the value 2, right? Now we reference that same value again, or variable again. We are creating it again, and we're giving it a value of 1. Now what Python does in this situation is it just replaces the old value with the new one specified over here. So in this case, what happens is that you're replacing 2 with 1 over here, and then you print it and it prints 1 instead. Now you may be wondering that if that happens, why doesn't it just show 1 over here 2 times? The reason for that is because Python does its decoding, or it just examines your code line by line. So you made the variable and its value is 2. You printed it on screen, so it's 2. You changed it to 1, so now Python's like, oh, it was 2 before, but now it's 1. Okay, so any code at the bottom, so let's say I have like 10 lines of code. All of these lines, if I mention the var variable, this variable right here, in any of these lines of code, it'll print out 1. It will not print out 2, because, well, that's just how Python works. Okay, now that's why when we print this, we get the value 1. So that's basically the basic principles of variables here. Now we can make the same variables with strings. It won't really be different. So I just made a variable called var2, which has the value of string, right? And I enter and print var2. Var2 equals not a string, and then I print it again, and just like the above number example, its value is string first, and then it's changed to not a string, and when you print it again, it prints not a string. So first it prints a string, and then it prints not a string over here. Let's see if I'm correct. As you can see, prints string and it prints not a string, perfectly fine. Now let's get into the fun stuff about variables. Let's say I create a variable called result space equals space, and over here I write the values. The values can be many things, right? It can be integers, it can be uh, well, normal text or strings. It can be a lot of stuff, any data type basically. And what we're going to do over here is, well, this. What we're doing here is basically we have a container called result, and we are giving it the value of 3 plus 9. So we're not actually giving it a value of 3 or 9. We are giving it the value that's the output of 3 plus 9. So what's the output of 3 plus 9? It's 12. So that's the sum or the output of 3 plus 9. It's 12. So now this variable result has the value 12 fixed into it. Let's check if that's true. So let's print result right here, and on the screen it should print 12. So that's basically how it works. Now let's go into some other stuff. So just like we did this 3 plus 9 example, we're gonna do a similar thing but in a different format. What do I mean by that? Let me create two variables, num1 which equals 5 and num2 which equals 8. So I made two variables, num1 which is the variable name and its value is 5, and num2 the variable name and the value is 8. So what am I going to do with these two variables? I'm gonna create a new variable called result2 space equals space. I'm supposed to specify values over here. So I'm gonna do num1 plus num2. Kind of the same thing here, but different. Why is it different? Instead of writing the values directly, so this 3 plus 9, it's not referencing anything, we are writing the keys or the labels of num1 and num2, these two variables, and is referencing their values. So num1 is equal to the value 5 as we specified here, and num2 is equal to the value 8 specified here. So if we print result 2, we get the value 13, and as you can see, that's perfectly correct. Now let's continue to the last part of this lesson, and that's gonna be, well, almost the last part. We still have to do floats, and that's creating a new variable. So that's called result3 space equals space. We have to specify values here. So instead of specifying just numbers or just variables, let's specify a combination of both. So 7 plus num2. Now think of what's going on over here. Result3 is a variable. It's the label of the variable of the container, and it's storing the value of 7 plus num2. So num2 is, again, it's like a key, so it's a reference to its value. What's its value? 8, as we define over here. So 7 plus 8, the value of 7 plus 8 is assigned to this. What's 7 plus 8? It's 15. And if we run that over here, it doesn't print anything since we didn't write the print function. But now if we do write the print function and we click on run, it prints 15 on screen over here. So that's basically the core concepts of variables. Now the only thing left to do is to use floats instead of these normal numbers. So how are you going to do that? Let's make this number 5.8 and let's make this number 8.2. Now one thing you may have noticed, like for all of these things, for strings or for integers or for floats or for any other data type, we have used these three so far, but it's the same for other data types as well. Why are we not specifying what data type it is. What's the reason? The reason is because Python is a very beginner friendly language, and hence it auto detects whether your value should be a string, an integer, a float, a long, or whatever it is. So right now we just wrote 8.2, 8.2 over here, and we have 5.8. And these values over here. Now the thing about floats is that floats have like a maximum threshold, so if they go over that number they aren't counted as floats anymore. So again, I don't know the exact number. It's a very huge number. Haven't really got the chance to memorize it yet, but that's basically how data types work in Python. It just auto detects what value you have, and it just acts according to that. So we have 5.8 and 8.2. Now if you run this, let's look what's gonna change. So what functions are using num1 and num2? Let's have a look here. So these two functions are using these variables. So this function is adding num1 and num2 into the variable, or into the container result number 2, or result 2. That's the name of the container. So num1 5.8 plus num2 8.2. What's that gonna print? 14. So this value 13 is supposed to be replaced with 14, but we have this function as well. So what's gonna happen here? We have 7 plus num2, so that's 8.2. So it's gonna print 7 plus 8.2, which is 15.2. So we are supposed to have the values 14 and 15.2 displayed in these two areas. Let's check. As you can see, it displayed 14 and 15.2. Now, important thing to mention over here in this part specifically. Now, this doesn't really refer to whether you have a float or not. Now, okay, what do I mean by that? Let me just explain. What I mean is, over here I have 5.8 and I have 8.2, and that has the result of 14. Now why is it printing 14.0? Now whenever you do any mathematical operation using floats or longs, also, yeah, before we continue, how do floats convert to long? Once they reach the maximum threshold, they automatically convert into long data types, and they're just used as that. No difference other than that. So yeah, 5.8 plus 8.2 is 14, and whenever you do any have mathematical operation with numbers over here, or float number types, it'll always print out as a dot zero at the end. Even if your number doesn't need a dot zero, if it's just a whole number, it'll still print out the decimal point, because that's just how Python works. And that's just how Python 3 works now. Okay, there are different versions of Python. I'm pretty sure Python 2 does not have this specification right here, but Python 3, the latest version of Python, does. So that's basically how variables work. And yeah, that's gonna be it for this video, guys. Please comment down below how this video was, and if you have any recommendations or ways we can improve it, and just anything else you want to comment down below. And be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can get updates for our brand new tutorials coming out soon. And yeah, that's gonna be it, guys, and thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you later. Bye.